let's discuss tonight's ongoing Duterte confirmation of charges hearing at the ICC with geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian. Richard is joining us from The Hague. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Paul. Pleasure as always.
All right. Well, Attorney Kaufman brought up the geopolitical situation concerning drugs and how the Philippines has become a transshipment point. And he even mentioned China, for instance. What do you think of how he framed that argument?
Well, I'm not very sure about the stellar legal record of Attorney Kaufman, but I think as far as public relations skills, some would say spins is concerned, he is at the very least as creative, I would say, in his communication skills as Harry Roque. So I think, unfortunately, nangyari yung dream team ni Harry Roque and Kaufman. I think Harry Roque would have loved to be part of this. But this is a tendency we see, that whenever there's a setback, I mean, there were repeated efforts over and over again by Kaufman, the defense team of Duterte, to basically sabotage the efforts, to question the jurisdiction, to reveal the identity of the witnesses despite all the risks that it would pose to them, to find many ways to make sure that President Duterte will not attend this. They tried to come up with medical excuses. Basically zero ang kanilang record so far. And if you look at Kaufman's record at the level of ICC, it's not also the most stellar one, but it looks like he was the most skilled available one. And last time I checked, he's not also a very affordable a lawyer. So I think he's very good in terms of making sure he reframes this. I think he even had comments about some of the senators in the country being affected because they were named as co-perpetrators. So he looks like he's not only an ICC lawyer, he's a geopolitical expert. He's an expert on transnational crime. He's also an expert on Philippine politics. So very interesting to see this kind of versatile Renaissance man leading the legal team of President Duterte.
Richard, the prosecution and the counsel for the victims, Joel Butuyan, used President Duterte's words against him. But then, in defense, Kaufman said, he quoted a few lines and said that actually they have 35 speeches, that if they had 20 or 20 excerpts, they had 35 that would contradict what the prosecution is saying. What do you say to that?
Well, hindi ito ping-pong, no? At like 5 points, you have 10 points. We know that in international law, and also pagdating sa Pilipinas, the president is the commander-in-chief. So whether you made 10 speeches or 50 speeches or 100 speeches, kung saan, you implied extrajudicial killings. You implied the defiance of our constitutional democracy. It's not only the good attorney you mentioned. There was also other team from the prosecution team who mentioned, literally, they recited Duterte's quote, whereby he was, basically implying impunity should our police forces engage in extra-constitutional or extrajudicial killings. So perhaps one reason why Harry Roque was not recruited to the defense team is because his own statement, Harry Roque's own statements back in the day against Rodrigo Duterte's record as a mayor and his threats to use extra-constitutional means to enforce law and order, those could have been used against him. So dito, nakikita natin na sarili niyang mga statements ay ginagamit laban sa kanya dahil may saysay ang sinasabi ng isang tao kung siya ang presidente ng isang bansa. In fact, in international law, if your head of state says something on matters that concern your national policy, binding yan. So I find it quite interesting for them. I don't know where they get the 30, 40 other statements. Maybe sinabi naman, joke na naman daw. But the president has been quite consistent over and over again that he implied impunity, if not full backing, for police officers who would engage in what many see as extrajudicial killings in fulfillment of his so-called drug war.
Did you observe the proceedings from the courtroom?
I'm not in the courtroom right now, but because I didn't have time to register, but we're observing and listening online. And of course, we have some of our colleagues and friends, including from One News, who were there. Yesterday, also, we interviewed some of the lawyers, some of the folks who are involved in this, including the families of the witnesses dito sa Hague. So we got a sense also of the mechanics. By the way, hindi today lang, no? It's going to be until Thursday. I was just talking to some folks in the diplomatic community kanina. It looks like there's going to be a break on Wednesday. So tatlong araw ito. So more or less this week tuloy-tuloy ito. So we're just seeing the opening acts. But some would also see probably this is the beginning of the final chapter for President Rodrigo Duterte, because I think for any reasonable person looking at the gravity of the evidence here, looking at the muster of witnesses and everything that the prosecution team is bringing together, it looks like really an uphill battle for the defense team. And I'm not surprised that the defense team is coming up with all sorts of extraneous arguments in order to take away from the legitimacy and the relevance of this process. Dagdag ko lang dito, no? Ang ICC po actually under duress tong ICC na to, no? They have been facing stiff sanctions by the United States, particularly by the Trump administration, collective sanctions. So their ability to transact financially, their ability to get consultants and experts from the United States. I think even yung spokesman nila, umiba na. So this is an institution also under siege. Because the United States, not because Trump cares for Duterte, but this is because of the ICC warrants of arrest against Israeli leaders, particularly Netanyahu, na hindi natuwa ang US. So to see the ICC functioning, pushing ahead, is quite interesting. But more importantly, for ICC, eto na yan. This is their grand prize. This is it. I mean, Rodrigo Duterte is probably the highest they're going to get for the foreseeable future as far as a high-level alleged mass perpetrator of crimes is concerned.
Richard, I'm just curious, are you there on some official business? Are you there with a delegation? You mentioned kanina na may mga kasama ka or nakausap kang mga diplomats and other lawyers.
I'm just a lonely academic and analyst who just happens to have all sorts of information. Kaya we correctly predicted that Duterte was going to get a warrant of arrest back in 2024. And also since last year, we have said that Bato and others would also be here. No, so obviously I'm here in my personal capacity, but because of my work on international relations, even international law to a certain degree, and of course my commitment to a rules-based international order, dahil tayo po ay galing sa Pilipinas, we know international law is something important to us, not only for the victims of EJK, pero para sa ating karapatan pagdating sa West Philippine Sea. So remember, yung PCA, not PCA, but the Arbitral Tribunal, which ruled on the West Philippine Sea, dito rin sila. So The Hague has been very close to the heart of a lot of people like me who have been following Philippine foreign policy and also how we leverage international law to protect our interests.
Okay, so what's the scuttlebutt you've been hearing there? How are others from other countries perceiving this hearing, or this pre-trial proceeding against former President Duterte?
Well, I mean, obviously, if it's, I mean, the superpowers, right, are against the ICC. The Russians obviously are against the ICC because there's a warrant of arrest for Putin. The Chinese have not signed up to it and have questioned international legal instruments and regimes because they feel they're exceptional. And of course, as far as the US is concerned, the current US administration is concerned, interestingly, parang may strategic ambiguity sila. So they're against ICC, they're against ICC's warrant of arrest against Netanyahu, but they were for ICC when it was against Putin, and then they're basically completely mum on ICC's position vis-a-vis the Duterte case, right? But importantly, if you talk to middle-sized countries, middle powers, European countries, especially behind the scenes, you talk to diplomats and experts, lahat sila nakikita nila yung value ng International Criminal Court. And by the way, there's another court, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, which is also hearing a related important case, not to Duterte, but to the Gaza conflict case, especially allegations of genocide in Gaza. So this is a very busy town. It looks like a sleepy town, nice tourist town, but ito yung capital ng international law. But in many ways, this is also a contraposition to everything that is happening outside. May pagka-feeling bubble eh. Once you get out of here, then that's the world of Trump. That's the world of strongmen and populism and defiance of international law.
Richard, do you feel besieged there when you meet those who are rooting for the former president? In the presentation and opening statement of Joel Butuyan, he said that they fear some of the expatriates who are Duterte clones, to use his own words.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I have friends from Netherlands, right? When I told them I'm coming over here, even the Dutch people are aware of what's happening here in a sense that they're hearing all of this news about very enthusiastic supporters of the president, camping here and showing their support for the president. As you know, last year, I was in the middle of a lot of controversy. There were people calling me names, etc. So Some of the journalists faced harassment, not only online but also offline. So these are tricky times. So I can imagine why a lot of witnesses don't want their or the family of the witnesses don't want their identity to be fully revealed. And I can also understand why a lot of people who are directly involved in this, whether as court, as just judges, whether as prosecution team, and also representative of the witnesses, also may have some serious security concerns. So yun nga, meron nga tayong impunity sa Pilipinas, pero nandito na tayo sa Europa. Sana naman dito, meron tayong law-abiding approach to this. I think as a nation, and I'll tell you this, as an educator, as an activist in a certain sense, no? But analyst naman pa rin. I do believe we have to have a reckoning with this. It looks like in Davao, there's a kind of a silence, if not a moment of grief there. In other quarters in the Philippines, may excitement about this. But guys, at the end of the day, ang pinag-usapan dito isang presidente ng Pilipinas. So in a way, I feel ashamed. I feel humiliated. It took an international court to look into these allegations of mass atrocities. Nakakalungkot. At kahapon, nakausap natin yung mga ibang abogado at saka mga supporters ng mga witnesses. At tinanong ko sa kanila, bakit hindi sa Philippine courts? Hindi ba ideal ang conditions sa Philippine courts? And basically, as they said, and this was also said by I think Ombudsman Remulla kanina, di ba? Na binubura yung ebidensya. So our system was completely sabotaged from within during the Duterte administration. At unfortunately, that's why hindi tayo pwedeng umasa sa local courts, especially when dealing with chief perpetrators. Having said that, hindi naman pwede umasa lang tayo sa ICC for the rest of our lives, right? We have to build our own judicial institutions, but we also have to have a national dialogue. Bakit tayo umabot sa ganito? How did we end up with tens of thousands of ating mga kababayan na pinatay under very suspicious circumstances? Why wasn't there more pushback? Because to be honest, I believe if in any other mature democracies, you had tens of thousands of people getting killed under questionable circumstances, you would have had millions of people coming out in protests. And yet, for some reason, I didn't see that during our time. Call it fear factor or call it whatever else. But I have seen in many countries, including in dictatorial regimes, people coming out in droves, risking their lives when they feel the fundamental principles of their constitutional democracy and their humanity in many ways was under duress and besieged by the policy of the state.
All right, Richard, we thank you for your time, and we're looking forward to some of the guests you may bring with you, especially to see, the European perspective also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So that was
Have a lovely day.
geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian joining us from The Hague.